Welcome to Courtney on Health, brought to you on MalcolmPresents.com, a new portal into the wild world of Zoom casting. Good morning, guys.
Hey,
How are you?
good afternoon, morning.
Good morning to me, afternoon to you.
Right. It's also, we're recording this on, it'll be for next, we're recording it. It's Halloween as we speak. So
That's right. That's
so
right.
Courtney and she has a golden pumpkin. And I've got this old pumpkin from, I don't know, I think I bought this at a store called Caldor's. Do you remember Caldor's? That was so long ago.
If the golden goose lays golden eggs, what does a golden pumpkin lay?
Golden seeds.
Golden
There
seeds.
it is.
There you
Maxine,
go.
you're right.
Okay. All right. So let's
Anywho,
get
happy Halloween.
happy Halloween. So here we are, and I already said hi to you guys. Hi,
Yeah.
Courtney and Malcolm, and welcome to Courtney on Health, a Zoomcast and a podcast series, which focuses on one's overall well-being with tips on nutrition and exercise given by Courtney Gravanese, registered dietitian. And she's a master of science degree in nutrition and
She's
applied
a master of
physiology.
everything that we've
She's a-
ever asked her
Well, I
about.
don't know
she's-
about that, but
You're you've got the props, you've got the goods. She's also an experienced nutritional and health consultant in the New York metro area and into beyond the
And
stars and
actually
above.
worldwide, because with telephone and Zooms, you're no longer limited to New York or
Right.
any place.
We're going international, baby. So she will help guide you on a path to
In
wellness.
fact, we're getting
and
telephone calls
health.
from you now, even as we're talking.
Are we? Okay. That's good. We'll take the call.
They got my message.
All right, somebody is checking it out. But anyway, we're talking about wellness and health. That's that's the show from a diet perspective and exercise and other things. And it's this time of year is flu season. It happens every
Mhm.
year. And it starts in the fall and continues into through the spring, actually. Although most people with influenza will recover without additional medical issues, influenza can be serious. So you need to take care of yourself and build up your immune system so you can be in good enough shape to fight off flu and other germs, because you need to stay healthy. Eat a balanced diet, exercise, and get a good night's sleep, which is, we want to do that all year round, but particularly this time of year. If you can't steer clear of the virus, at least use good hygiene to create a barrier against flu germs. Wash your hands with warm water and soap. And if you shake hands or in contact with a surface that might be germ covered, you can use a little of that sanitizer also. So
Sure.
yeah, right. We know that was big during COVID, and I think it's here to stay. So Courtney has some great information on what foods help build our immune system and how to maintain good hygiene during this season of flu. And I will personally add that it is important to get a flu shot. It's something that
Yes.
will help guard against it, at least in some way. So
Yes,
Courtney,
yes,
so let's get started. Where what is the flu? How do you catch it? Where do we go? I mean, what's the scoop on the flu?
Sure. So hello to both of you. And I have to say a big shout out to, even though most of the followers from sort of from the info that I can gather are within the United States, a big shout out, and although Alaska is within there, to my followers in Alaska, Asia, and Europe. So thank you.
Ooh, the globe.
So yes, I wish there were a way to completely avoid the flu. We are in the Northern Hemisphere. So this is we're starting our flu season here. Southern Hemisphere, because of the alternating seasons, has theirs obviously during their winter. I'm often asked the question, and people ask this a lot, a couple of things. How do you know the difference between a cold, flu, and now, COVID symptoms, right? So I will say that the biggest driver of flu symptom would be that really, oh my gosh, I feel like I have been hit by a truck and can't, I'm achy everywhere. And that doesn't mean that with your common cold, you can't feel that way. But typically that feeling of you just got nothing left in the tank is very, very common among people who get flu. So
Yeah,
flu,
but
for those of you who
it's
don't
common
know,
among the people who had COVID.
what was that?
Isn't that common with people who have COVID? It seems to be a big crossover.
You know what, the weird thing with COVID, and just same thing with flu too, is that people can feel that way also, like, oh, I feel, you know, I can't even, it was a non-starter for 2 days, I couldn't even get out of bed anyway. But there are also some people who breeze through with COVID and like, I had a cold, you know. So I feel like all bets are off. But the reality is it's no fun to have any of these. So, you know, hopefully we can do many things to prevent getting any of these. A word about why, what is it about the fall and winter into early spring that makes it quite hospitable for the flu, you know, the flu bug, right? So first of all, the viruses prefer colder weather. So they don't like heat. As funny
They
as
don't
that
like,
sounds.
but we like to have heat in the winter.
I know. So they are more abundant. So you've got pure volume of the virus circulating in our area. So we don't spend as much time outside, and even in places that are warmer, like where you are, Malcolm, during the winter months, people may be spending more time inside. If they're inside, they might be closer in contact with somebody who's carrying one of those circulating, you know, influenza viruses. So that's part of it. And then with less sunlight comes less vitamin D. And we know about vitamin D's role in helping sort of support, bolster our immune function. So there's no one answer as to why the fall and winter is the season for flu, but we just know it is it. So you do what you can, which is the reason why, by the way, your flu vaccine is typically timed fall. You typically don't want it any earlier than September unless there's something particularly odd about that strain. And you can go probably into December and still have enough time to mount immunity into winter time.
I got mine.
Yeah, I
Yep.
got my flu
You
shot.
guys get yours that you need to get.
What is the difference between the flu virus, you said it's a virus, and the COVID virus? That gets me totally confused. Is there?
There is a difference.
Well, first of all, you know, I know what I know, and I like to stay in my lane. I am so far and away not a virologist, so I don't even want to go down that road. I mean, I think it has to do with their protein structure, but that's about as far as I'm going to go.
Okay.
In terms,
I just needed a ballpark type of thing, and I know you know a lot more than I know, but instructions.
you know,
tough.
so the weird thing about if you obviously we know we get the flu vaccine every year, and there's a reason for it. It mutates. So what makes this different than some other types of, like, for example, measles, mumps, rubella? Like, why don't we get measles, mumps, rubella vaccines every year? Well, they don't mutate, and we know that influenza viruses, much like the COVID virus, they mutate, and the flu vaccine mutates roughly every year. You know, I think we don't know what the COVID virus, you know, is it every 6? Is it every year? It's to be determined when it comes there. But so that's
the first cousins, so to speak.
Yeah. So, I mean, let's face
they're
it,
both
coronavirus-
viruses. So
Yeah, they're coronaviruses. So those have been around for a long, long time. But about the things you can do, and we should be doing a lot of this year round, not just as we're in the runway leading up to flu season. But you touched on some of these, Maxine. You know, we talk about you know, adequate sleep. We're talking about, you know, quality diet. And what do I mean by quality diet? So we want those compounds that appear to not only have antioxidant capacity, help, you know, manage blood sugar, help with cardiovascular disease, but also really seem to strengthen our army of immune fighting, our immune supporting cells that can fight off infection. So when we think of that, we think of things like choline. So think of eggs, think of sweet potatoes when it comes to choline. We know about the big group of phytochemicals called flavonoids. So think about anything anything with that color, right? So your berries, your reds, your purple hue, celery of all things. We used to think that celery was just like this low calorie but devoid of any nutrition. But as it ends up, Yeah, it's low in calories, but it also happens to be a very potent source of flavonoids, which could be very helpful as an anti-inflammatory.
What about
So-
chicken soup? That's actually supposed to be really good for a lot of reasons. Like, explain there, dietitian.
Yeah. So it's really fascinating. Like they've actually done all types of studies, right? So not necessarily like, the gold standard, double blind, placebo-controlled studies, but studies in animals, studies in, petri dishes, some studies in humans. And there does appear to be a benefit to grandma's chicken soup. Why? Well, if you think about the way, and they've actually used standardized recipes, by the way. So not only do you throw the chicken in there, but it has the standard recipe that they've studied the most has sweet potato in it. So there's that choline, right?
Sweet potato in chicken soup?
This is so the studies that have actually looked at chicken soup had sweet potato in it.
I would not think of that.
But carrots, onions, celery. So speaking of onions happen to contain something called quercetin, which along with apples and broccoli and kale appears to have very strong anti-inflammatory benefits as well. So when you throw all that into, a liquid, and remember with a soup, everything, even if it's leached into the liquid, you're consuming all of that. So you're getting all of those really super immune fighting compounds in that incredible bowl of warm soup.
Yeah.
But based on the studies, it appears to, and again, it's a little loose. There's no downside to having chicken soup. But is it really going to prevent you from getting a cold? I don't know, maybe not. Does it make you feel better because it helps sort of inhibit neutrophil, which is a type of white blood cell, neutrophil count, and reduce inflammation? Probably there's something to that. We know that hot liquids, along with teas, I just happen to have hot water here, but they really help thin mucosal secretions, which really helps clear a cold much quicker.
Yeah.
My little teacup here.
Yeah.
I'm a major tea drinker. Is tea
Question,
one of
please.
the good things to have too? I'm sorry, Malcolm.
Okay, now I have a question, from that. I grew up in a Jewish household, so chicken soup, and probably Max can confirm that, is known as Jewish penicillin. I wonder, I know you grew up in an Italian household. Was your soup Italian penicillin?
Italian penicillin?
Italian penicillin.
Or
Yeah,
did you do Jewish penicillin also?
but there's something very comforting about it. I don't know if there's one flat out answer why it may make us feel better. Like I said, even if it's just that you're getting, and even if there's different varying recipes for chicken soup or the kind of vegetable soup that I had growing up, the reality is you're consuming it. Nothing's getting lost. So you may be even eating those vegetables, but even if you're not, the vitamins, minerals, compounds are being pulled from that into that broth. So even if you're just having the broth, it's like a supercharged, powerhouse of a warm beverage that is probably giving you a little bit more nutrition than you might think.
They also have bone broth now, seems to be a thing.
Yeah. So back to your tea question, Maxine. It doesn't appear to have that same effect on neutrophil count, and might not necessarily have the vitamin and mineral compounds to it, but it might have flavonoid activity to it, depending on what kind of tea it is. And then let's not rule out the fact that it is a warm liquid. Warm liquids will first of all, they're contributing to your hydration, make you feel a little bit better, and they will help thin the mucosal secretions as well, which is really what you're looking for, particularly if you've got one of those stubborn, dry coughs, or you're just trying to clear some of the gunk, as a scientific term. There you go.
I like tea, and it's clearing gunk, so that's pretty good. What about supplements like, supplements like zinc and vitamin D? Because we're still on food, and I know we should, be heading to exercise and other things, but can you give us some info on how that helps the immune system and thus can, dampen the flu bug in you?
Absolutely. So zinc, I feel like along with vitamin D, got a tremendous spotlight on it during COVID. But meanwhile, it's been an unsung hero along with vitamin D for a very, very long time. So zinc is absolutely instrumental. as part of our immune function. There are cells for zinc throughout our body, particularly immune cells. Here's the thing with zinc though, okay? A little bit is good and adequate and does a decent job of keeping, remember, so you need that minimum. And for most of us, that's about 8 to 12 milligrams a day. Typically shellfish and meat products are going to be your best sources of zinc, but also beans and legumes, absolutely good sources of zinc. At the very start of a cold, so when you start to feel that, and we've all been there, a little scratchy throat, maybe you're starting to sneeze a little bit more, a little runny nose, that's the time, and there is some decent research, although dosing really needs to be tweaked a little bit more with additional research. If you start at that point with supplemental zinc, for the duration of your cold, studies seem to suggest it might not necessarily reduce the severity of the cold, but studies seem to suggest that it will reduce the length of how long you have that cold. So there's a benefit right there. Now the problem is you don't want to keep this sustained. So for those of you who are interested, generally that dose, and again, to be determined, right? So stay tuned. Roughly, you don't want to go any higher than about 40 milligrams of zinc a day during that loading phase when you're not feeling well. And usually it's broken up throughout the day. There are things called zinc lozenges, like Zinkies, things like that, that are available. But you don't want to continually take more zinc than what you need. Why? We know that a decent amount of zinc actually helps support decent immune function and keep you well. Too much zinc does the exact opposite, and we see suppression in your immune function. So it is one of those, and yet great examples of, we want a good amount, we want to work with everything in the body, but you don't want to overload it for too long.
So that's
Vitamin
important.
D. Vitamin D we've spoken about before, and then the food sources. It's kind of a tricky one because most people don't eat high, at least not in this country, not in the United States. We don't get a tremendous amount of D, and during the winter months, we're certainly not getting enough sunlight to create our own vitamin D. So in many cases, supplemental D could be needed. That amount, of course, is a conversation with your physician, and oftentimes you may need a blood test to see where are you right now so that you're able to adjust the supplemental dose to help you.
So what about
speaking of sunlight, how much sunlight do you need? Because again, year round, I go walking. Now, I used to go running, now I go walking. So I'm out, and basically in California, I get the sun 2-3 hours a day. Is that sun the same? And it's not the same intensity, but do I get that value from the sun in November as I would in July, even though it's cold?
Well, I would have to find out about the specific time of year. You are correct, with the sun lower in the sky, it's not nearly as intense, but the general rule of thumb with regard to how much sunlight, remember, without sunscreen sunlight exposure you would need is about 20 minutes. It's not very long. Okay. So even if you're in like November or December where the sun is lower in the sky, if you're out for a couple of hours, you are probably absolutely fine. Now, again, there's always this balance of sunscreen. You don't want to be out there all day without sunscreen on. That would be terrible for your skin. But we don't need to be out there for very long in order for your body to create that. But even that is a lot for people. We're bundled up, at least here on the East Coast, in northern states. So there's not a ton of surface area. Maybe it's just your hands that's getting that sunlight.
So speaking of walking,
yep.
How can exercise help your immune response and thus maybe lower your chances of catching the flu, which we didn't kind of go as how you can really, we didn't go delve into how you can catch it, but it seems that you mentioned about surfaces and being close and things like that, but exercise, what is that role?
Right. So, close proximity, obviously sneezing on something, like you said, dirty surfaces, which is why every kiddo now has been taught, whether they do it or not, guys, is entirely different, but every kiddo has been taught to sneeze into their elbow. And parents, it really is in the elbow. If your kid has their elbow up and they're sneezing into the air still like this, that's not going to work. Directly into the elbow. Use a tissue if you can't necessarily do that. Wash your hands or use hand gel afterwards to prevent that. If you're going to be out and about, cover that cough and that sneeze as best you can. With regard to exercise, we know that among many other benefits of exercise, the exercise can benefit your immune function by making it, remember, you don't want it too robust, you want it just right. So it can help you get to that just right spot where it's able to attack and deal with germs and invading viruses and bacteria that enter your body. So exercise has been known to do that. Not too much exercise though, because there's a bit of a, particularly for people who are first starting out exercising, and I've seen this actually multiple times, if somebody is starting at zero in terms of activity, and they don't do a gradual introduction into exercise, they really sort of hit that gas pedal and really do very intense exercise. It's not uncommon for them to get some kind of bug. Why? Because they push the throttle a little bit too much and their body's very busy with sort of muscle breakdown, muscle synthesis. It's being asked to do a whole lot. And unfortunately, what ends up happening sometimes is that an individual might get sick. So you want good, consistent exercise to absolutely keep you as well as possible. And we know that exercise certainly helps with better sleep in the long run. If you're consistently going sleep deprived, or you're consistently sleep deprived, we know that your immune function will take a big hit. So you want to make sure that you're getting that adequate exercise. I'm often asked, well, if I'm not feeling great, like what's the scoop with having being sick in quotes and exercise? And the general rule would be, obviously, if you've got a fever and you're feeling like that truck just hit me feeling, your body needs a lot of time to heal. And that would be your time to unplug, rest, hydration, and just stay put. Plus, you don't want to be out and about if you've got a fever, because chances are you're highly contagious, and that wouldn't be very cool to do to others. If you're recovering, and feeling, not 100%, but doing okay, then I would say you do it on a day-by-day basis. Certainly getting outside for some fresh air, going for a walk, maybe taking instead of going, at 100%, maybe you're going to, start functioning at like 25 to 30, to 50%. That might be a better way to go. Light activity in the absence of a fever. Are you feeling like complete garbage? Or again, are you really, very sneezy, coughing a whole lot? I mean, if you want to be outside on your own where you can't contaminate, somebody else, that would be fine. But I don't think that's the best time to be going into an enclosed area like a fitness center where you really could be spreading germs to a bunch of other people.
Yeah, I mean, I wonder, there was one of the reasons the flu wasn't as bad the last couple of years because of COVID, is because people were masking up. Now people have literally, tossed the mask away on
Right.
every level. And you see in a lot of countries, in Asian countries, they use masks a lot more on a preventative measure. Is that something preventative in your eyes? As a healthcare?
I certainly think we've got the data to suggest that it certainly help. I don't want to put all viruses and bacterial infections into the same bucket at this point. I'm not just going to look at COVID. So if you have to, if you've got, a kid who's really feeling poorly, keep them home from school. If you've got a kid who's getting over something, or, it's just it's like an average cold, they're not really dripping or anything, I think the right thing to do would be like, you know what, let me put a mask on. You're in an enclosed space during flu season, and you're not comfortable, I would put a mask on. It might necessarily help you. But I think that's a case-by-case, situation. To your point, Maxine, we are seeing a rise in all these things we did not see during COVID because nobody was doing anything. And we were wearing masks everywhere. So RSV, the rise of RSV.
Yeah, I was just I just wrote that down. ESP, RSV. No,
There
RSV is not good. Can you give a little
a
info on
comment
that?
on the Asian or the Asians wearing masks, or they're used to it. A lot of the reason they were wearing masks is because they had the awful air pollution. I know that was in Japan, where they wore the mask because it was impossible to breathe. It really wasn't to not get germs. It was not to breathe the air.
Right. Well, yeah.
I have a far out theory, and I don't know if you've ever heard it. To me, the body knows how to cure itself. They have, it's sort of like when you have an infection, the white blood cells go over to kill the infection. Now, My theory is that if you knew the right combination of antibodies, that the body could probably produce it itself. So, I mean, I do that a little part when I feel ill and I meditate. I sort of tell my body in the meditation, this hurts or that hurts. Can you help me? Can you produce the antibodies in the body? Again, I have absolutely no idea whether it works or not, but that's my theory. I don't know if you've ever considered that.
I hope it's true. I mean, I believe in I think there's been research done on the power of positive self-talk and meditation and relaxation. So we can't discount any of this. I would like to think that, but I think when it comes to the world of immunology and viruses and how our body responds to things, it's a very complex process, and certainly very complex for most of us. And I'm going to put myself in that situation to truly understand what's going on and what makes vaccines work. And, why do we need some more often and others not so much? And so anyway, I think that's a much more complicated answer than I'm certainly equipped to answer. But Maxine, back to your point about RSV, because it is on the rise and it is serious, and you want to make sure, although anybody can get it, we're seeing a real uptick in children. It stands for respiratory syncytial virus. Now you see why they abbreviate it to RSV, because it's a big mouthful. So the symptoms are very, very similar to any other type influenza, cold, COVID type, but it can cause significant respiratory distress. So if you have any question whatsoever or concern whatsoever, the first thing to do would be to call your pediatrician's office and find out what he or she recommends in terms of either coming in there, how severe the symptom is, and whether an emergency room would be necessary. You want to use an emergency room, emergency department appropriately. And the first place to do that, by the way, and I have to say this, and I love social media. I think social media can be great, but I also think we rely on this, parents, adults, grandparents included. It should not be your first line of information, particularly if you're concerned about your child, your pet, whatever. That's when you seek out the relationship you may have with a healthcare provider in your world. So I think that really needs to be the first step, and not Googling it. We all love Dr. Google, but not necessarily the right way to go. We don't want to post it. We don't want to do like group chats. Go to the people who know this.
You need best. The doctors, right? You need to go.
Doctors.
And with that, how about any info that you have on Tamiflu and medications that might help fight off? Again, you'd have to go to your physician, but there are now more medications that they've had in the past than, they didn't have as many in the past, or any, but now, there are some on the market.
Right, absolutely. So all the more reason why the first line should be to communicate with your doctor to say, listen, this is what I feel like. He or she will ask what your symptoms are. They may need to see you, because they might need to remember, it's not impossible, by the way, to have a virus, and then that virus makes you more susceptible to getting a bacterial infection. So it is possible to have both. So although we don't give antibiotics for viruses, that's where things like Tamiflu would come into play. You only give antibiotics for bacterial infections. It is possible to have both of those. And really, you would need to go into a doctor's office in order to find out, all right, what are we working with here? Are we working with just a virus? Because then he or she can prescribe one of these antivirals, which seem to do a good job of shortening that duration. And then in their case, maybe even reducing some of the severe symptoms that you might be feeling.
Yeah, but there's more now. And now with the RMNA, vaccines, which are not only helping, that's what's in the vaccines for COVID. It's going to sprout out, and it's also spreading into other areas, including cancer. I mean, it could potentially be, a game changer on a medical level for disease.
Absolutely.
So the more research they do, and the more that becomes something that's hopefully in the near future, that's a good thing, I think. But anyway.
I think you have to have a positive mental attitude for anything. I mean, I wake up sometimes I listen to the news or read the newspaper, and I get so depressed, not necessarily about politics, but about all the new diseases they're discovering and all the different viruses there are, and how it's non-controllable and how many people are getting it. It's like we're not going to be destroyed by nuclear waste. We're going to be destroyed by viruses and all these little bugs and microscopic
That's
bugs.
Well,
Yeah,
yeah,
well,
one thing that hasn't changed, if it bleeds, it leads, and that's always been the credo of media. So, they might not get a whole lot of views or clicks if they're talking about a lot of the good things. We're just going to hear a lot of that. So you see why it's a problem. Like the whole scrolling I'm not saying you do this, Malcolm, but it's kind of hard to dodge all of that negative. And people, they spend a lot of time like scrolling through it, and it negatively
I
affects
can't. I mean,
your head.
yeah.
So,
it's
yeah.
just-
Yeah, but I believe in your advice, Courtney. Eat well, do your exercises, sleep, get the rest. That's all.
Do a little meditation, a little
Prepares-
breathing.
Yeah,
prepares your
absolutely.
body.
And I'm big on a sense of community. I keep coming
Do
back
good.
to the blue zone mentality of, being around people. It's solid social circle, being involved. Maybe if you can give back, not everybody can. I totally get that. They're stretched so thin, but I think there's something to that's definitely one piece of that, wellness puzzle that I think often gets overlooked.
But
Yeah,
on
it's-
that
it's-
note, as you heard the beeper beeping, it's time for us to go. We've had,
Are we out?
we have our half hour.
we're beeping up, and as I'm looking down at my phone, because it beeped, but it's on silent. But I've been busting my son's chops to get the flu shot, so he just texted me, "Got the flu shot." So
All right.
there you go.
Okay.
Big thumbs up.
Even the millennials are starting to think right.
He probably
Thank
listens to the
goodness.
show.
All right, so I'm gonna take us out here.
Take us
Thanks for
out.
all this great information, Courtney.
Of course, of
Once
course.
again, keeping people safe and well. So thanks for joining us for Courtney on Health. To get more info, follow Courtney on her Facebook page, Courtney on Health, on Instagram at CLG Wellness, which is also TikTok. Visit her website, CourtneyGravenese.com. For more shows, go to MalcolmPresents.com and theManyShadesOfGreen.com. This has been Courtney on Health, Smart Sound Nutrition, Strong Safe Fitness, and it's Halloween today. We're filming, so trick or treat to all the trick or treaters.
Right.
Be safe and watch what you're doing, but enjoy the candy. And we'll catch you again next time.
Happy Halloween. Have a
Happy
great night.
Halloween.
Bye, guys. Thanks a lot, Courtney, Max.
Thank you.
Bye,
See you
Mal.
next week. Bye.
Bye.